Hey everyone, so today I wanted to show you how you can mix your music on your SP-404. And in case you're not familiar with the term mixing, that just means taking your individual instruments and samples and making them sound good together. And it's a really important step in the production of a track that can really enhance it or totally ruin it depending on your mix. So I want to show you how you can really get a great mix pretty easily out of your SP-404. If you're new to mixing, or maybe you've tried mixing and you've felt a little intimidated by it, don't worry, I'm going to keep things really simple and straightforward, and I'm just going to go over the essentials that you really need to do to get a great mix, as well as some of the more creative, fun things you can do to get a more interesting mix. And if you're more experienced at mixing and you've done a lot of mixing in a DAW, you may be thinking that the 404 is kind of limiting and you won't have all the tools that you need to get a great mix. But I would say one of the most important parts of using an SP-404 is the possibilities for creativity and doing things you might not normally do. And that creativity spills over from the music production process into the mixing process really nicely. I know for me personally, my mixes that I do on my SP-404 sound very different than when I mix in a DAW. And it's really just a lot of fun to mix on a 404 and get those different results. And a couple other quick notes before we jump into the mixing on the 404. So when you're producing a track on your 404 and you're getting close to finished and you're getting to that point where you're ready to start your mixing process, I would encourage you to switch over to a higher quality listening device if you haven't already. And specifically, I'd recommend either using studio monitors or a really good pair of headphones. Preferably, you're using good studio monitors, and luckily there's a lot of different studio monitors available at pretty reasonable prices. Generally, all studio monitors are made specifically for mixing and mastering music, so there's a lot of good options, and generally all of them are going to work pretty well for this purpose. The only thing I'd recommend doing when you get studio monitors is watch some videos on how to set up studio monitors and specifically where to place them in a room. The size and shape of a room can make a really big difference on how they sound, and where you set them up in the room can help negate some of the negative effects of a space. You can also do some treatment, and a lot of people will really highly recommend doing a ton of treatment, and it can get a little pricey pretty quickly too. But I would say there's a good chance you don't need to go too crazy with treatment, and you might not really need much at all if you've got a lot of soft surfaces in your room. Overall, just experiment with placing them in different places in a room and use your ears and try to find a spot that sounds good. And in the case that you can't use studio monitors and you need to use headphones, there are a ton of different headphones out there, but I would say that not all of them are really great for mixing music. You'll want to look for a pair of headphones that's described as being more neutral or balanced sounding. A lot of headphone manufacturers are making headphones specifically for consumer use, and they don't really care if they're balanced or neutral sounding, they're just trying to make them sound good. And a lot of times that results in really loud bass, and we really want to try to avoid that when we're using headphones for mixing. Also, I would say try not to feel intimidated by learning how to mix music. It's a process that you can start learning pretty quickly and easily, and it's something that you'll get better at the more you do it over time. A common practice that people will use when they're mixing music is they'll check the music on different devices. They'll take the track that they're working on and they'll go check it on a phone or a Bluetooth speaker, or in the car. That's a pretty common one too. The phone in particular is a really good one to check that on, not only because a lot of people are just listening to music on their phone, but the frequency response can be really weird coming out of a phone. So certain sounds can really stick out of your mix really heavily on a phone. And that's a good practice that even more experienced engineers will use pretty often. And with all that, let's hop over to the SP-404 and start mixing. So I've got a track that I'm working on here, and I'm far enough along in the process that I feel like I'm pretty much done with production, and I'm ready to dive into the mixing part of the process. It's a laid back, kind of vibey track. The beat sounds like this. And then I have a bunch of vocal samples to go on top of it.
No, you lie. No, you lie. Yeah.
And I have a main vocal sample that's going to be sort of the melody of the track.
I don't need no reason just to get it fired up. You give me that feeling when you leave me tied up.
So I have a good idea of what I want the mix to sound like. I want the groove to be a little bit punchy, but not over the top loud and in your face, because it's not really like a dance song or something like that. And then for the vocals, I don't want them to be too high up in the mix. I want them to almost sit just like a little bit under the groove. And a common thing for newer mix engineers is to have their vocals too loud. That's a really common mistake. And it is to a large extent personal preference here. This music is an art form and there's no wrong way to mix. But I just know for me personally, for a track like this, I want the groove to be almost the main focus, not quite. I certainly want that main melody to be a big part of the track. But I just want that main melody to just sit a little bit under the groove. And that's one of the most important parts of mixing, is getting a really good balance between all the different sounds. So I'm going to start doing that now, but I'm also going to continue balancing out all the sounds throughout the mixing process. So let me start playing, and I'll individually start adjusting the volume of each individual sample. I'm trying to be very precise with my balance of each track and get everything really as close to perfect as possible. To me, this is the most important part of the mix. And I'm also going to start listening to the quality of each sound and decide if I need to change something and resample it. Resampling is going to be the main way that we add effects or change a sound. So if I think a certain sample needs more reverb or less bass or something like that, we can do it through using the effects with resampling. And I know already that main vocal sample sounds a little off from the pitch shifting and time shifting, so let's take a listen.
I don't need no reason just to get it fired up. You give me that feeling when you leave me tied up.
So you can hear there's like a low, rumbly, kind of warped sound to it, which sounds pretty bad. But importantly, I want to hear that in the context of the beat, because that's all that really matters, is how it sounds with everything else. And I'm going to see if I can hear that low rumbliness through the beat itself. And if so, I'll start making some adjustments to that vocal sample to make it sound better within the beat. So I can hear a bit of that low warped sound in the vocals. So I'm going to see if I can make some adjustments to the vocal sound and then resample it. So the first thing I want to try is some EQ, and I'm just going to pull out the lows and see if that fixes it.
I don't need no reason just to get it fired up. You give me that feeling when you leave me tied up. I don't need no reason just to get it fired up. You give me that feeling when you leave me tied up.
So that's not really going to do it. I'm going to try something else. The other way of pulling out some lows out of the sound might be through a filter. Let's try that.
I don't need no reason just to get it fired up. You give me that feeling when you leave me tied up. You can get it if you need it. You can get it when you need it.
So that's not going to work either, I don't think, because it's just pulling out too much lows and I'm still hearing a little bit of that warped sound underneath it. So I'm going to try thinking a little bit creatively and try using some different effects where I can just alter the sound in a way where that's not as harsh sounding.
I don't need no reason just to get it fired up. You give me that feeling when you leave me tied up. You can get it if you need it. You can get it when you need it. I don't need no reason just to get it fired up. You give me that feeling when you leave me tied up. I don't need no reason just to get it fired up. You give me that feeling when you leave me tied up. You can get it if you need it.
I actually think that sounds a bit better, and normally I wouldn't use distortion to try to clean up a sound, but that's just part of sort of the creative process of using the 404, is experimenting and trying different things. So now that I found an effect that I want to apply to the sound, I need to resample it to create a new sound with that effect on it. And importantly, I don't want to delete this original sound because this is such a critical part of the track that if I screw something up, I want to have access to the original sound. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually turn the effect off and copy this sample to a different bank, just so I have it, just in case. So now I'll go ahead and resample it with that effect on it.
I don't need no reason just to get it fired up. You give me that feeling when you leave me tied up. You can get it if you need it. You can get it when you need it.
And now I can delete the original one. And just be aware that deleting a pad on the 404 is a danger zone. You cannot undo a delete. So just always be very cautious with deleting just in general. So the other thing I want to do with this sample is get a little bit of a delay on it, but not on the entire sample. I want to do a delay just on the last word of each phrase, which is a common thing you'll hear in like a lot of pop music. So I'm going to dial in a delay and then I'll resample and turn the delay on just on that last word.
I don't need no reason just to get it fired up. I don't need no reason just I don't need no reason just to get it fired up. I don't need no reason just to get it fired up. You give me that feeling when you leave me tied up. You can get it if you need it.
That tape delay is a little crazy, but again, we want to check how it sounds in the mix. It might work perfectly fine.
I don't need no reason just to get it fired up. You give me that feeling when you leave me tied up. You can get it if you need it. You can get it when you need it.
So that sounds pretty good in the mix with the beat, so I'm going to go ahead and resample it with that delay just tapped on for the last word of each phrase. So I'm going to go ahead and go through all the other samples and essentially do the same thing. I'm going to pick out delays and reverbs and things that I think will blend well within the mix. And the whole time I'm going to be making sure to check the balance of every sample. That's still the most important thing, and I'm going to constantly be slightly adjusting the balance here and there for everything. So a couple other things mixing related for the 404. You saw me change the volume in this pitch and speed menu for each sample.
Get it
can also change the panning from left to right for each sample within this menu. If you hold down the shift, you'll see that far right button is panning. You can go to the right, to the left. And that can be a really nice way to put some stereo imaging within your mix. So for example, I've got this vocal panned a little bit to the left,
No, you lie.
and then this similar one panning slightly to the right.
No, you lie.
I just think that creates sort of a nice balance and contrast between those two samples. The other important thing I'm going to do in this mixing process is use bus 3 and 4 to dial in some effects. For this type of track, I like dialing in those more compression-based effects like the vinyl sim and the cassette sim. So you can see those are the two that I've dialed in on this, are the vinyl sim and the cassette sim. To access those, you just hit Shift 16 to get to these effects settings, and then you can scroll over to the 3rd and 4th buses here. So depending on how you want to record your track, you can actually use bus 1 and 2 as part of the mix as well. I tend to use bus 1 and 2 for the more active effects, so I like to turn them on and off, like punching them in, to use like the DJ effects looper or do filter sweeps or that kind of stuff. So I typically reserve bus 1 and 2 just for those things, and I rely more on the resampling. But if you're not doing many of those punch-in effects, you could just take bus 2, for example, and dial in a reverb on it. And then you can send whatever you want to that reverb. So all you would have to do is send each individual sample that you want with that reverb to bus 2 to get some of that reverb. And you can see which samples are being sent to which bus by what color they are. The orange ones are being sent to bus 1, and the green ones are being sent to bus 2. And if you want to switch that, you just switch to whichever bus you want to go to, and then you hold remain and hit the pad that you want to switch. Now you can see it's blinking green, so now that's going to be sent to bus 2. And if I want to switch it back to bus 1, I just switch over to bus 1, hold remain, and hit it again. And if you're in this mode and you hit it one more time, it'll switch to white, which means it's not being sent to either bus 1 or bus 2. There's a lot of different things you can do with these effects buses, but most of the time, usually I'm sending more of the groove or beat-based stuff to one bus and everything else to the other bus, so a lot of the more melodic content. Or a lot of times I'll send just the drums to one bus and everything else to the other one. But it's obviously super flexible. You can try all kinds of different things. And a lot of times while I'm recording, I'll be doing just one long recording and I'll be experimenting a bit with what's being sent to what bus and what effects I'm using on each bus too. Like I said, the 404 is a great tool for experimenting with fun sounds. At this point, I feel like the mix is in a pretty good spot and it's pretty close to done. So here's a demo of the final mix.